Welcome everybody to Radicalized Truth Survives. My name is Heidi Kuda. I'm here with Jim Stewartson and High Fidelity. Thank you to all of our friends who've been sending good wishes to our friend Sean Connor. He sends them right back at you. He's still on hiatus, and we too are suffering from anagram withdrawal. So we do understand and feel your pain. But seriously, thank you everybody for sending so much love, as you always do. We have an incredible episode coming up with our special guest, Dr. Stephen Hassan. All our friends already know who he is. We're going to be talking about the cult of Trump as it relates to what we just learned in the January 6th hearings, as well as many, many more things. We have an incredible gift that he's going to be on our show today, and we're very, very grateful. And so, gentlemen, let's just jump right into Front Loaded.
Front Loaded.
Yeah, Connor, yeah. So as you guys know, we are in a disinformation war. We are in a malinformation war, a misinformation war, a psychological war, and we don't have a good enough arsenal of words. And I was watching Jim's latest brilliant explainer on Dugin and Flynn, and the word propaganda has jumped out at me a lot in the last few days, because propaganda and propagandist is not covering for the people we're trying to reach, really the depth of the insidiousness of what it actually means. So I am always eager to come up with better synonyms. And some of the ones that I've come up with are traitor, anti-democracy agent. I think, Jim, you had a couple of your own. I think that we need to hit back harder. Criminal, that's my whole thing. Fight back better. We have got to get our words to match the gravity of the situation. And Jim, what say you?
Well, I mean, propagandist is the right word. The problem is that most people think of propaganda still as, dropping leaflets over Korea, right?
Right.
And, or blasting American radio, into the enemy's camp. And that's not at all what propaganda is anymore. It's scientifically designed traumatic material to dissociate and indoctrinate you into cultic ideologies. And,
thank you.
And
well,
so
there's also bias. It heavily plays to bias. People are targeted based on vulnerabilities, based on their proclivities. I mean,
that's the point, is that propaganda is no longer just this sort of blanket blasting of whatever your message is. It's incredibly scientifically targeted at individuals' vulnerabilities based on their life experience or whatever biases they happen to have. The propaganda goes directly into their brains and changes their minds, right?
So,
To change your mind is a phrase we usually associate with free will, but these people are changing America's minds for us.
thank you. I thought about this last night, and I came up with psychological batterer. Like, I wanted to come up with something as hard and mean as what it's doing to us.
There's psychological assassins.
There's a word, and this is an interesting word. Maybe we can have it for word phrase. Is menticide. Yeah. Menticide is the intentional destruction of someone's psyche.
Okay.
It's like homicide, except for your mind.
Thank you.
And menticide is what's going on here, right? The propaganda, quote unquote, has destroyed the minds of tens of millions of Americans. It's psychological warfare. It's weapons of mass destruction. They just go off in your skull instead of outside.
Oh my God. Okay. Thank you so much for that. I want to use it I want to think in terms of a sentence where we could replace the word propagandist. So I just want to go back to something you've reported on a lot, Jim, and I've reported on somewhat, the December 18th meeting at the White House that has been featured prominently in the January 6th hearings. And I was thinking about it. Propagandists with ties to Russia were trying to overthrow the election. who had ties to Russia at the December 18th meeting? You had Mike Flynn, you had
everyone.
Patrick Byrne, you had Rudy Giuliani, and you had all these guys who were already either under investigation, already, so I just, for me, it's like propagandist doesn't fit the bill. For me, they're traitors. They're traitors using psychological operations, and maybe we just need a few more words.
Yeah, I mean, the traitor, these people are waging war. And that is the problem overall, right? Is that we all feel it. We all get psychologically, battered every fucking day.
Yeah.
And we just haven't acknowledged it, and we're not fighting it. And we can't, because we're not even saying what it is. We're not saying that there is a massive, massive fifth column inside of the United States. These people, and I will talk about this in Hellscape, these people are following the ideology of Russian imperialism. They don't know it, but that's what it is. That's what's going on here, and we'll talk about that in a bit.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I always throw these things out, and I just feel like I have the most supportive team, and I'm so grateful to you guys. Ivana, RIP. Condolences to friends of Ivana Trump, who seems to be very well regarded by those close to her, as well as some personal friends of mine who really enjoyed her. So as people know, she met an untimely death. I have to say that death did provide the Trump family with an excuse to get out of providing sworn depositions to the New York Attorney General. But as our friend Martin Scheel, our correspondent, our retired federal agent, noted, their time is coming. So that is just something we want to point out. I do want to also say that I think it's important, because we are at war. I think it's very important that one of the things left out of some of the eulogies, that our friend Craig Unger, who's written a lot about the history of Trump and Russia, he did remind he did. He's brilliant. He did remind me of something that I think is worth pointing out. It's worth noting that Ivana's father was under surveillance by the Czech Secret Service and was regularly debriefed by them. It was common practice for the Czech Secret Service to share files with the KGB. So it is possible that the KGB first opens files on Trump as a result of keeping tabs on Ivana. And it's just a possibility. But I do want to report from the Guardian archives. In 1987, Donald and Ivana Trump visited Moscow and Leningrad on invitation from a Soviet ambassador. The trip was arranged by a travel agency that was an undercover KGB outfit. Soon after returning, Trump announced he was thinking of running for president. So just a bit of history.
And that's when he was putting out full-page articles, about the Central Park Five and all of this racist, divisive bullshit has been there for a long time. Look, Donald Trump is the worst businessman of all time. The only reason why he had any money at all is because the Russians were flooding it to him, and he's been in their employ for 50 fucking years.
As our very good friend
Rudy in New York, like that's the Russian mafia.
Yeah. Right there. I just want to, I want to, so there's no confusion for people who watch our show. As Michael McKay, our friend, says, money launderers are fake rich guys. So please always look behind the curtains when you're dealing with these characters. That said, I do wish her friends, I send my condolences for sure. Trump's coup rumbles on. The brilliant headline of my latest in the print edition of Byline Times, and why I'm really proud of this is I did a whole series. Jim helped me with this. He's featured in it. I did a whole series on the January 6 hearings. The reason I'm really honored to be in this particular issue is look at that cover, Exit the Hollow Man. Okay, we had Hardeep Mathura, the editor of the Byline Times, on our show, and she talked about the hollow men and the hollow man. And I think this is a recurring theme, but I just think that this is iconic. I think it's going to be historic, and I'm so glad that a number of my reports along with some work I did with Shard Norris on Roe, made it into the print edition. And this is just to encourage our fans who are always asking how they can help. You can help by taking out a subscription to Byline Times. You can help by joining our Patreon. The independent voices, I think, are very critical, and I'm very, very, very proud as an old school journo to be a part of something as fantastic as that. And Hardeep and Peter Duke's title, Trump's Coup Rumbles On. So much going on in that headline, you know? I thought it was quite ingenious.
Look, I just got to say this. The mainstream press is fucked. And I'm just going to say it right out loud because, you know, it took me a long time to really get how entirely broken most of our press is, right? There are people out there getting paid large sums of money to go and lie about shit, to say stuff like Mike Flynn is crazy, right? To promote nonsense like, you know, Paul Ferber and Ron Watkins did Q. The mainstream media is really not immune to this influence at all.
No. Well, that's part of it.
There are things like Byline Times, you know, Heidi, you know, Humbly, this show, that are saying things that other people won't. And I think it's incredibly important, as Heidi said, to support them any way you can. Not just us, anyone who's telling the goddamn truth.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I think that one of the things we learned from my girl, Jackie Singh, is that we have we have underestimated, this will be the first Jackie Singh reference of the show, we have underestimated the enormity and the enormity of the coordination of the cognitive hacks occurring daily. And one of the techniques that the Kremlin has perfected in this new hybrid warfare, asymmetrical warfare, is purchasing not only politicians, but also journalists. So don't believe the hype, yo. You know what I'm saying? Like when you see things that sound tinny and Jim's telling you it's not real, you know, do us a favor and, you know, take it seriously. So, all right. Thank you so much for a vibrant opening to what I'm going to go on the record and say is going to be an amazing show. Hi-Fi, let's get into word phrase of the week.
So our word phrase of the week this week is kayfabe. And what is kayfabe? Kayfabe is the art of presenting staged presentations as real, and it's a pro wrestling word.
Yeah.
However, it really applies to our current reality right now because there's a lot of kayfabe going on. It is kayfabe that has serious real world consequences, but it's being done to us specifically to manipulate us. Kind of how
Excellent.
pro wrestling manipulates its audience, right?
Right. I mean, you guys remember for a long time, like it was sort of controversial whether wrestling was real or not. Like anyone who actually grew up with it, like it was always this sort of, you know, secret that everyone fucking knew that it was all just a big play, but they didn't actually, you know, sort of say it until much later on. You know, in many ways, pro wrestling was kind of the first alternate reality game on television, right? Like it presented itself as real with real heroes and villains, but you know, they went backstage and had a beer together, right? After they beat each other over the head with metal chairs. And that's what you see on fucking Twitter all day long. Yeah. Is people who are beating each other over the head with chairs in, you know, in tweets, and then they go in DMs and hang out. There's a lot of that going on, and it's hard to tell. And yeah, you know, it's important that people get that muscle to realize that not all of the interactions you see, not all of the messages you read are authentic.
Well, it's also very important for me watching the January 6 hearings, particularly number 7, how much theater craft and how much wrestling showmanship was revealed in the clips that the committee chose. And as Jim said, when you have a psychological operation going on, you need these characters, you need people who play these roles. So again, I ask everybody just to get a bit more cynical when they're looking at the things that are out there, so they can actually not be duped by this very reality TV gamemanship and showmanship.
I mean, to be fair, if people are watching our show, they're probably pretty cynical already. But
Really?
No. Yeah.
But more cynicism never hurts, right?
Yeah, I mean, cynicism combined with self-care. I do think that, I was trolling a right winger. Not trolling. I was kind of checking out a timeline, and it's very important. So a lot of things are sold, and some of it is despair. So I just feel like, be aware that despair is sold and weaponized, and practice self-care as you engage in this fight with us. So that's all.
Yeah.
I'm being kind
of kayfabe, like what I'm going to talk about in Hellscape is the sort of ultimate version of that. It's a fake fight between these global elites that are supposedly trying to enslave humanity, and the patriots who follow Q and think the election was stolen. That is kayfabe, to the extreme.
Okay. I look forward to that. All right, let's breeze through White Matters so we can get on with this show. Thank you.
All right. You're very welcome. So Why It Matters, we're going to talk about 3 stories this week. And I'm sorry I don't have my punk rock opener, but
we don't have our punk rock producer.
No, that's all right.
Why matters? What does it matter? High fidelity.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you. That was great, Jim. That was good. So our first story this week is corporations have no Fourth Amendment. And this is actually a combination of 2 stories. And the first story, it actually broke on Hacker News and Y Combinator, but it is currently making it into the mainstream. And this is what is up with Facebook URLs. And if you're like me and you pay attention to technology news and things like that, that was the forum where it broke on Y Combinator from Hacker News. It turns out that Facebook is encrypting URLs to get around the do not track, opt-in only marketing. So Mozilla now strips out tracking URLs from links when they resolve the links, and this is Facebook. It's basically it's an arms race to see who can get around technological measures that are supposed to keep people private. But guess what?
Right.
Corporations have no Fourth Amendment. And the second story that's involved with this is also rather interesting, because the Fourth Amendment gives us the right from unlawful search and seizure, except unless you've got an Amazon Ring doorbell, in which case Amazon will hand over your stream to the police if they request it. No warrant, just, yeah, sure, here you go. So that's kind of bad. Guess what? Corporations have no Fourth Amendment. I think people need to pay a lot more attention to that when they're making their technological decisions. Having a Google Home, a Nest thermostat, a Alexa voice device in your home.
I don't even have a TV. I got none of that. I got all that shit turned off. None of that.
Well, that's good, because actually research has shown they can track you through your TV.
Well, thank you for that. I do know that we learned a long time ago from our friend for, countering digital hate, that these companies are beholden to their, shareholders or the billionaires who owns them, and they're not looking out for us. So further evidence of that. All right. Thank you for that high five.
All right. So our next story is world's burning. I don't know if anyone's been paying attention to the weather in Europe lately, but they are having a record high heat wave of 40 degrees Celsius. According to media, over 300 people have died from the heat. Spain and France are facing massive wildfires. What does this have to do with disinformation? Climate change is just a myth, right?
Well, so one thing that's very frustrating for me, and I know that Europe is experiencing temperatures, as you told me earlier today, that were predicted for 2050. Why I'm annoyed is I've been reporting on this stuff for years, and it seems like every July when the heat gets nuclear, everybody suddenly remembers climate change, then fall comes and they report on elections and other things. This has always been about climate change, fossil fuel versus renewables.
Then you have fucking like Congress people coming in with snowballs, right? In winter. I mean, like, look, where's the climate change, right? Like that is the level of discourse that has fucking entered our legislature and the government at large. And it goes back to disinformation. It's been the oil and gas industry pushing this bullshit counter narrative to the obvious fact that people are dying all over the world and islands are submerging and cities are getting flooded. It is don't believe your lying eyes, right?
Right.
It is
yes.
Classic disinformation, and it's been going on for decades.
And we are going to be facing climate apartheid, and that is something that we'll talk about more in future episodes. All right, so let's get on to the last item.
The last item this week is well, I think everyone by now is aware of the 10-year-old who was forced to leave Ohio, go to a different state and have an abortion. The GOP instantly turned on the story saying it's fake. When it turned out to be real, they said the doctor didn't follow the law. She did. They glommed onto the fact that her supposed her alleged rapist was an illegal immigrant, not the fact that it had happened. And we need to pay attention to the fact that their laws that they passed, that they are in support of. This is on them.
Listen, and God, it's so hard to say this out loud, but the Supreme Court are controlled by terrorists. It is a terrorist court, and I know that just sounds so crazy, but this 10-year-old, if that's not terror, that's not terrorizing someone, terrorizing her family, terrorizing everybody else who has to grieve with her for what she had to go through. That's fucking terrorism, and it's the very, very beginning of what they've done already and what they intend to do in the future. So, let's be
in the interest of time. What this is. In the interest of time, I don't think anyone said it really better than Alexandra Petri in the Washington Post editorial. One is a child, not a child. I'm just going to read the first paragraph because everyone should hear this.
I'd also like you to read. Can you also read the last paragraph as well? So both the beginning and the end, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
A child is not a child when believing in her existence would force you to notice your own cruelty. When the story of a 10-year-old who had to cross straight lines to end a pregnancy that was the product of rape, because the post-Roe laws in the state of Ohio are cruel enough to force birth on a child in her circumstances, is sufficiently monstrous that you want it to be unimaginable. And the last paragraph is, these are men who don't know a child from a woman, a person from a womb on two legs, because they simply do not want to know. This is the way they write these laws, around actual people and actual medicine, without a thought to the bloody and painful consequences. an ectopic pregnancy can be whisked elsewhere in defiance of all medical science. If it's a legitimate rape, the body has ways of shutting that whole thing down. Do not allow life with all of its tendency towards detail to get in the way. Protect the children at all costs. That 10-year-old is not a child, of course. She is a woman. The law is not for her. There are babies to consider. There is a child to protect. When is a child not a child? When you are choosing not to protect her, because she is a child all the same.
Well, all I will say is that, as Jim has taught me, the cruelty is the point. And we have seen Ron DeSantis outraise Trump by being cruel and doing such vicious acts, and we got to do something about this judicial coup. So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how to add to that. This is the reality of our nation, and I still don't think we've quite woken up to the terror that's befalling us right now, and it's just going to get so much worse until we recognize what we're actually fighting.
And that is something we must do collectively. So if you are a friend of RadPod, send it to 4 other people. Ask them to send it to 4 other people, and let's start elevating the truth of the seriousness and just how sinister this war is. Okay, Hi-Fi, appreciate you. All right, we're going to do a little bit of Sean's brief legal briefs.
Brief legal briefs.
Off of something we've already reported on. I'm calling it Suicide Trolls Go to Jail. As you guys know, I don't like the word troll because it's cute and furry. These are virtual assassins. These are character assassins. These are often paid people or very deranged sociopaths. So I'm bringing it up because I want people to put pressure on their legislators, because now that the UK and Japan have toughened laws against online harassment campaigns and those behind them, including jail time for the people behind these hate accounts, we ask America to do the same as we evaluate how we're going to be addressing online harms. Please criminalize cyberbullying. I feel karma can't come quickly enough for those who traumatize people online. Japan's law, which we mentioned a few episodes ago, was born out of the death of a 22-year-old wrestler, Hama Kimura, who tweeted before she committed suicide that the hundreds of vile messages a day directed at her online hurt her, okay? And I started looking at the faces of these people who committed suicide due to online harms, and they started to look a lot like the victims of gun violence. So I'm just saying, we need to take some fucking action now. We are failing as a society to protect people from virtual assassins. And that's all I wanted to say. Can we move on to Hellscape?
Yeah, I thank you for that. Yeah, the level of criminality and harm that's caused by these people, and you're right, they're not trolls. You know, they are psychopaths who take pleasure from harming other people, and it cannot be legal.
We need better words.
In civilization.
We need better words, and we need stronger laws.
Agreed. And on that cheery note,
Jim Stewartsen's Hellscape. Oh fuck.
Let's give Jim the big floor.
giving Jim the big floor. Actually, here, let's try it this way.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Perfect. Great.
Yeah. Cool. So what I want to do is talk about where the ideology of all of this comes from, and so we've seen a lot of ink spilled about how Mike Flynn is crazy, how Rudy Giuliani is just some kind of old wacko. No, all of this is being driven by Russian imperialism. It really, really is, and I'm going to show you briefly how. I did a long video explainer of this on my Substack. But Alexander Dugin has been called Putin's brain many times. This is an article from 2014. Alexander Dugin and the philosophy behind Putin's invasion of Crimea. Dugin has been the one who has pushed the idea of a Russian empire that covers all of Europe and all of Asia. He calls it Eurasianism, or the fourth political theory, and all it means is that Vladimir Putin and Russia wants to take over the world. So let's look a little bit about why he's important right now. And the reason he's important, and I apologize for this horrifying image, but
that is a completely horrifying image.
This is the real image of the monster we're fighting. And this is a combination of Mike Flynn, who is overtly promoting Duginism to all of his followers, and Alexander Dugin himself. So I want to give you just a quick idea of who Dugin is. So Dugin started the National Bolshevik Party. It's really short for National Socialist Bolshevik Party, meaning Nazi Bolsheviks. You can see over here, this is the logo of his National Bolshevik Party, which is simply the Nazi eagle with two heads pointing east and west, with the hammer and sickle instead of the swastika. Dugin is a person who genuinely believes that both Stalin and Hitler were right, and he wants to take the best ideas from both of them and create a theocratic white ethno-state that is controlled by Russia. It's really that stark and really that simple. Now again, why does it matter what this crazy ass guy says? Well, in March, he wrote a book called The Great Awakening versus the Great Reset. Now, anybody who's been following disinformation at all knows the Great Awakening just means QAnon. QAnon is the Great Awakening. Q itself used this phrase 75 times. That is QAnon. And the Great Reset is the new conspiracy theory, the new big lie that the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and George Soros and all these, Jews and globalists and liberals and communists are taking over the world, and if you don't go to war against them, you will die. That is the message, literal message. So here's Dugin's book. Now, here's Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn's traveling PSYOPs tour. This is literally where he goes all around the country and takes hundreds of dollars from people so that they can be psychologically traumatized into this propaganda, which indoctrinates them into a death cult. This is a death.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Jim?
Jim, we just lost your audio.
Can you hear me? No?
Yeah, now we can hear you. That's fine. Yeah. So you had just said this is
cult.
You had just said this is a death cult, and if people don't get it now, I don't know what to tell you. But here it is. This
is Dugin. This is Flynn.
Jesus.
Dugin, Flynn. Now, Here's where I'm going with this, because it relates to what we've been talking about. Now, on the cover of the fucking book, here's what he says. Dugin calls upon the inhabitants of the heartland to relentlessly attack on all theoretical and practical fronts the global elites of the coastlands who try to impose their perverse anti-human ideals by ruthlessly eradicating the long-standing cultures and traditions of all peoples in the world. He's literally calling for civil war. He's calling for the heartland to attack the coastlands. Now, let's take a look at this map. This map is abortion access by state after the reversal of Roe. Here's the fucking heartland, and here are the coastlands. What Dugin, Putin, and Mike Flynn are trying to do is create a civil war by traumatizing American citizens so much that they feel that they have no choice. That is what is happening all across the country, not just at these traveling PSYOPs tours, but everywhere. I'm going to play just a little bit of Dugin just to give you an idea. This is in July 2015, right as Donald Trump is launching his campaign, right as Mike Flynn is meeting with the Russians. Here's his message to America: a common struggle. So, you get the idea, right?
Yeah, all the buzzwords are right there. All the buzzwords. Globalist.
All he just described QAnon, right?
Yeah, right.
He described QAnon, the globalist elites who are trying to screw up your gender and your whiteness. I mean, he's saying all of the things in 2015 that Q, Mike Flynn, and this will be the last video, this guy. Forgive, we could skip the ad in 3 seconds.
People can read the chyrons.
I don't know why it's so low.
It's okay. We can read it. We can see it. I hate his voice.
The American World Order, right?
Fundamental breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And the liberal
globalist,
American
yeah,
for no other reason than the pursuit of hegemony. So these words are all the same words.
Yep.
That are being used by Mike Flynn and the fascists that are trying to take over country. So I'm just going to say this, and then I will sign off from Hellscape. The disinformation that this is just some wacky general out there, just riling up a few hundred followers, or whatever the disinformation is about him, you need to understand he is in league with Vladimir Putin using eliminationist Nazi ideology, literal Fourth Reich ideology coming to America right now. This is the monster. We need to acknowledge it.
So before we bring on our guest, I have a couple things I want to say about this monster. Please listen to Jim's video explainer on his Substack. It's 52 minutes. I listened to it twice. It has all the receipts, all the details. So please understand this is rooted in a lot of hard work and a lot of investigation savvy. I watched this and I realized just how freaking important and critical the work is that Jim's been doing in Gal Suburban and Dave Troy and many of our friends. Dave Troy and I did a iconic story about a year and a half ago. That was the first time I started to understand the connections between the Fifth Column and the Kremlin, World Congress of Families, Dugin, Bannon, all this stuff. What I thought was very incredibly important, Jim, in your 52-minute video explainer was that you showed Mike Flynn not just using the same title as this Kremlin psychological batterer propagandist, but he used the same words, like working off the same fucking script.
It's literally, I mean, like the same people are on the cover of Dugin's book, and in this graphic. It's the same story about transhumanism and Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. It's literally the same propaganda. It's same propaganda.
We are sorry to inform you, if you're just tuning in, that a retired lieutenant general is a traitor to our country. And we ask this rhetorically and with all seriousness every episode: why is Mike Flynn still free?
Arrest Mike Flynn.
Definitely arrest Mike Flynn.
That's it.
I'm constantly inventing new ways of saying that.
All right. Enough of that. Happy fun stuff.
Mike Flynn.
Oh my God.
Enough of the happy fun stuff. Let's talk about our guest because he's coming up.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Okay, so I'm going to do a little intro. Jim, you do an intro.
I need to do a little one too when you're done.
Okay, so I don't know. I just love Dr. Stephen Hassan. He's helped so many people through his personal experience and his incredible books that he has authored. You're looking at one of them, his incredible website, freedomofmind.com. The reason that we invited him to be on this show is, of course, he can come any week, but I did an interview with Adrian Goldberg of Byline Times Radio and Byline Times podcast, and he had never heard people talk about the cult of Trump, and he asked me why I use those words, and I got to recite my teachings from Dr. Stephen Hassan, and I thought, let's just have the man come and tell us about it himself. And Jim, why don't you talk about your history with Dr. Hassan?
So when I first got started looking at QAnon and all of the undue influence out there, before I even really understood what was going on, but I could tell that there was very, very substantial psychological control and harm being caused, I reached out to Dr. Hassan immediately within the first week, I think, or two, which is how I met Dave and a whole bunch of other people. Dr. Hassan, and I've said this before publicly, is the most important person in the world. He holds the key to helping save hundreds of millions of people, not just in America, but around the world, who are suffering from undue influence as a result of psychological warfare operations. And, he was the only person in the world that, in my opinion, really, really understood the mechanics of it. And, I'm just eternally grateful for him and that he's going to be on our show.
Well, guess
All
what?
right. Yay! Yay! There he is. Give him the big box. Give him the big box.
Give
I
us
don't
the
know
big
if
That
I don't
book's
box.
know if
me
I
there.
can I don't know if I can live up to the introduction, but I'll try.
Oh,
Hi,
Dr.
Steven. It's
Hassan,
great to
you're
see
Just
you,
call
man.
me Steve, please. It's
You know what? I like saying Dr. Hassan because I know how hard you worked for that, but I also like the fact that we can call you Steve because I think that we are a lo-fi show and we're all on a first name basis, but all our viewers obviously know who you are and know of your work. But I found out that some of our friends in the UK who also need this information may not know so much about your work. And the great thing about our show is our viewers are global. We have friends and patrons in Italy and all over the world. So without further ado, I would love so much for you to, just kind of give a brief intro, and then immediately, if you had an opportunity to watch the January 6 hearings, particularly number 7, where you met a few people who were under undue influence, who are now atoning for that, who I believe were in the cult of Trump. Maybe you can talk about your observations there. So voila.
wow. And I want to say Jim Stewartson is responsible for teaching me about alternate reality gaming. And we did a Dismantling QAnon TEDx that Dave Troy sponsored, and Desiree Kane was there as well. And I still think that that episode, it's 45 minutes, I believe, is really important. Essentially, I was radicalized when I was 19 years old, the same month that Patty Hearst was abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army. I was an upper junior at Queens College. And Heidi's correct. I grew up like 1.3 miles from Donald Trump. He was on the wealthy side of Union Turnpike. I was on the small attached houses side where you could hear the neighbors flush their toilet. But anyway, my girlfriend dumped me abruptly, and I was kind of blue and starting the spring semester, and I had just purchased all my books for the spring semester, and 3 women came and started flirting with me and asked me to sit at my table. It's a long story. I describe it in Combating Cult Mind Control, my first book that came out in 1988. That then got published in many languages. And after 27 years of trying to update the book, I finally was able to arrange to buy back the rights so I could update my own book, which I did. And so we have an updated edition with only 1 T in combating. That's how you know the original one had 2 T's. But anyway, I entered this crazy world, not believing that anyone could ever brainwash me or mind control me. And it was really after a near fatal van crash due to sleep exhaustion and weeks away from the cult. And back then there were no cell phones in 1976, I remind you, for all your younger listeners. And I did reach out to my sister. I heard your description, Heidi, on the Byline podcast. It's absolutely true. Love is stronger than mind control. And I reached out to the one person in my previous life who hadn't said, "You're in a cult, you're brainwashed, how can you believe this, you're so smart." She just was like, "I miss you and I don't understand and I want you in my life." So when the opportunity came, I broke the rules, called her. That led to a deprogramming. And I didn't agree to the deprogramming because I was having doubts. I had 0 conscious doubts because they were all suppressed. I wanted to prove I wasn't brainwashed or mind controlled. So I agreed to listen to the former members. And part of what helped wake me up was learning about Robert J. Lifton's work with Chinese communist brainwashing in the 50s. And his 8 criteria were the Mooney's 8 criteria, which was a point of dissonance or confusion, because I was programmed to believe we were doing God's will and they were Satan, doing Satan's will. But it was really that last day when I was asked, Steve, what do you think about this? And they handed me a printed speech of Moon to Congress people, where he was saying how much he respected Americans. And he was surprised anyone could imagine that a Korean could brainwash American people. And I had been in leadership hearing him for 100 times saying how stupid Americans were and how ignorant and how Korea is the master race. And after all of my experiences, that was the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, or the light switch turned on. And I was like, wait a minute. If he's a lie, I thought he's a liar. And as soon as I said it consciously, it was like a house of cards starting to go plop, 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 plop,
Brilliant.
plop, plop. And basically, I just couldn't understand how I got to this place of becoming a right-wing fascist who believed democracy was satanic. I had hated Nixon before Watergate. I used to fight with my father who voted for him. And in the cult, Moon said, we're going to Washington, D.C. and fasting for Nixon during Watergate for 3 days, which I did. And I called my father thinking he would be happy. And he was like, Steve, no, you were right. He's a crook. Like,
Wow.
no, Steve. And I'm like, yes, Dad, you don't understand.
Wow.
And he said, now I know you're brainwashed. The guy's a crook.
Wow.
But what there is a methodology once you take away all the content things, because people can be brainwashed into all kinds of ideological belief systems that are all or nothing, black and white, us versus them, that when you strip it all away, we come to a different understanding of human mind and social psychology. And for example, and why I became a doctor was just a few years ago, because I realized nothing was changing of substance. And I realized the law itself was about 100 years out of date with what we know about psychology and the human mind, and that we're not rational agents. We don't turn 18 and suddenly we can think clearly and responsibly and make good choices. We now know neuroscientifically the brain doesn't even mature till age 25 or 26 in most people. But the point is human beings are learning organisms. And if you can control the information flow, you can control people's minds, which led to me reformulating Lifton's brilliant 8-point model, Singer's 6-condition model, to based on Leon Festinger's model of cognitive dissonance theory, where he said as humans, we have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and we like to be in alignment. And typically what happens is we become rationalizing of behavior that we get emotionally tricked into doing or manipulated into doing. And so the bottom line is I decided, with the encouragement of people from my forensic think tank at Harvard Medical School and a particular professor, Michael Commons, who said, this is really important. You need to do a doctorate. Master's is not enough. You need to do a quantitative study on your model to prove whether it has scientific validity. I'll help supervise your research. And I know which college you can go to because I've sent 30 people to go to graduate school there. So with all of that, it was like the moment of like, yes, this is what I need to do. So
and thank goodness for that. So I know Jim has questions. I have questions.
Go for it.
Let me make a couple points, Jim, because I want to steer him on Trump, and then please you go next. One thing is, please immediately sell the t-shirt "Love is Stronger Than Mind Control" from your site so we can support your work, because I will be the first one to buy it. That is the message. That is a very important message, and I hope that you actually do have a merch side. From the moment Trump came down the escalator, you saw and heard echoes of cult leaders such as the Reverend Moon. And what did you hear that tipped you off to knowing that there could be con man techniques? Because just like you said,
Oh, it
with
was way
Flynn-
before that.
okay.
Like I grew up in New York and I actually watched 10 full minutes of The Apprentice.
Mhm.
So I already knew he was a malignant narcissist. And that's the stereotypical profile of all cult leaders. It was actually when he was debating other GOP people that and simultaneously I was researching ISIS recruitment online and understanding there were AI systems to manipulate memes online. Um, I was actually interviewed by Taryn Southern months before the 2016 election. She said, "Who of all the cult leaders are you most worried about?" I said, "Donald Trump." And everyone was like, "No, Hillary's going to win by a landslide." I said, "I don't think so." Not anyway. So, for me, I really am a therapist by training and experience. I'm a human rights guy. I'm really not that into politics. I guess my first real introduction into politics was after Jonestown. Bob Dole, Senator Dole at the time, invited me to do a hearing because Congressman Ryan had been assassinated along with over 900 American citizens. And a former member of People's Temple was also brought to DC. And we arrived, and then we were taken off the agenda. And the head of the Moonies spoke of the United States. And I went, "What?
Wow.
Huh?"
Yeah.
And I had been a whistleblower for a congressional subcommittee investigation looking into Korean CIA activities in the U.S. George Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA back at that time. I turned over all of my internal documents of how Moon used to give a talk and it would be recorded and transcribed literally without editing. So we got just a lot of stuff that I gave to the investigators. And when the final report came out, it was 18 days before Jonestown, and there was 80 pages on the Moonies, and they were calling for an interagency task force to go after them. And I was, again, hot diggity dog, but then nothing happened. And I'm like, what's going on here? So I sat down and I read 11 volumes of the congressional investigation with the transcriptions. And one of the more interesting ones was by the founder of the Korean CIA, who said he, quote, organized and utilized the Unification Church for use as a political tool, unquote. And I came to understand in the height of the Cold War, North Korea was brainwashing. South Korea had 2 coups and some, anti-communist, whatever, black ops people, or maybe not so black ops, thought we need to do a brainwashing program in South Korea to stabilize the country. And let's use a proxy group. Let's set up the Moonies to do it. So it's not a government operation.
Wow.
And so the Moonies were used to set up a gun factory operation where guns could be dispersed or wherever the CIA wanted to do it. America was fed up with Vietnam, so we were drawing back from there. And they thought, let's bring the Moonies to the U.S. and recruit on campuses to counter this left wing, we need to get out of the Vietnam War thing. And I recently posted a podcast. I have a podcast called Influence Continuum on the Midas Touch platform.
Great.
I interviewed Alan Tate Wood, who was the top political operative of the cult, who left the cult a few months before I was recruited. And when we met in 76, he said, "Steve, I left the group because they were making people into you. They were making people into Nazis."
Right.
And I was like, I'm so sorry that I got radicalized and this new identity was created where I was willing to die on command or kill on command.
It's amazing, and there's so many things we want to talk to you about. Jim, you go ahead. I've got like 6 points I want to get through in the next 20 minutes, but you go.
Um, so what's one of the things that's been fascinating over the last year is watching the Trump cult and the Moon cult come together in very
Yeah,
scary ways, right?
yeah.
Trump spoke at Mooney, convention, basically, where all of the cultic symbology was present, and he was praising the moons up and down for
For
helping
money,
save
for money. He
Korea.
was
So,
praising him for
so
money.
Jim, I just need to tell you the Moonies go back decades
Oh yeah,
to the Council for National Policy and
100%,
Gary Jarman
Wow,
and Jim
yes,
Whalen, who was in the Council
absolutely.
of National Policy, was the
yes,
Washington Times founding editor. That's
Right,
yeah.
Moon's paper that lost $2 billion in
didn't matter
operation. Where'd the money come from?
exactly.
So
Yeah, so
this has been that's the thesis of the cult of Trump, is this has been
well,
a many decade project to
yeah,
dismantle separation of church and state and
exactly.
to bring forth a very totalitarian, authoritarian agenda, uh,
Wow.
and so and that's where I really want to credit Dave Troy, who is phenomenally bright and a great researcher who's looking at the historical trends, and he's really contributed tremendously to my understanding.
And I want to credit you because you're the one who told me that George Bush Sr. got $2 million for giving a speech, I think, from the Moonies. And I think that it's very important when we do look at the history of this. And you said one other thing that Jim brings up that I think is so important. You got radicalized right when Patty Hearst was kidnapped, and she got radicalized. We don't need to wait for the kidnappers to show up on the streets or the doors anymore. It is happening through online means. It is happening
Exactly.
through social
Online.
media. And so I would love for you, I don't know if you watched the seventh hearing or not, but I would love for you to talk about, if you didn't see it, we can just tell you that there were multiple gentlemen who testified how they were essentially under what we have learned from you is called undue influence. And can you speak on any of that?
Sure. Where to start? So, first of all, I want to tell your listeners that brainwashing is not permanent. The best way to understand the phenomenon, I have my hat on as a mental health professional now, is to look at dissociative disorders. And the simplest way to explain it is there was the old Steve Hassan, the real Steve Hassan, who wrote poetry and liked women, played basketball, and had no interest in power and money and controlling the world. And then I was mind controlled to create a new pseudo identity in the image of Moon that suppressed the real me. And so there's this dynamic tension in every person who's been mind controlled to suppress their conscience, their values, etc. And so the issue is really exposure to contrarian points of view and information, but even more importantly, to have interactions with people who were important to you, that you had a trustworthy relationship with before you got radicalized. And I've been saying this for many years with the cult of Trump. The worst thing you can do is block or call them names and try to use facts to persuade them. If you understand how to sidestep the brainwashing, which I write in my books, and you're warm and you ask questions in a respectful way and are patient and wait for a response and then follow up, that's how we're going to de-radicalize millions of Americans and people around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you said an important word, I think, before, which is opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Giving, because as I understand it, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to force somebody out of brainwashing. They have to find their own way out. And the way to help them do that is give them those opportunities as you had, right? take an action on their own, to have a realization on their own that starts that house of cards falling down.
That's right.
So again, I've been doing this work for 46 years since my own rescue from the Moonies. And there are people who are born into authoritarian families or religious cults or political cults or regimes. And then there are people like me. I got recruited at 19. So I had a fairly formed identity and value system prior. So with folks who are raised in authoritarianism, they kind of need to first be told what a healthy environment would be like, where they're not corporally beaten for questioning the pastor or their father or a mother or whatever. And so, but the bottom line, what I want to say to your listeners is educating people. And I'm going to hold up my influence continuum. It's on
Very
my
important.
website. I'm sorry for the reflection. But the idea is ethical influence is informed consent. Lying is tricking, withholding vital information, or distorting it. And people, by looking at behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control, and I have a long list on my website. This is the BI and then the TE. You can self-diagnose yourself. I did a TEDx on how can I know if I've been brainwashing. The thing is that if someone attacks someone who's been programmed, they're programmed to defend and do thought stopping. The phobias, the irrational fears that have been programmed in their mind kick in. Whereas if you act as if you might be a convert for them, where you are open to changing your mind and create a safe frame to have a interaction over time. And remember, people get radicalized over time. De-radicalization is best done over time, not like happened to me with a snapping moment where it was very traumatizing for me. Why? Because they didn't explain phobias. And Steve, we should fear things that are dangerous, that can kill us, but we need to be able to use our frontal cortex to evaluate if something is an irrational fear, right? And if they had explained how other cults put phobias in people's minds, and then I could see it, then I could reflect on, if I was asked as a Moonie, well, how is your experience different than that? Like, and with MAGA people, it's Chinese communist brainwashing, and it's pimps and traffickers are the frames that are going to be most effective. Because when you interview people who are in the MAGA bubble, they think they're going to cure trafficking. And so it's like, yes, I want to cure it too. What's your approach? I'll tell you my approach. I've helped to develop with sex trafficking survivors a curriculum to help women understand pimp mind control. And I try to walk the talk, that I'm not just going after right-wing authoritarianism. I'm going after left-wing authoritarianism. I'm going against
plenty of that.
Malignant narcissists. Go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up what I think is a critical topic, which is trauma. You said it before.
Yes.
From what I understand, and I'd love for you to correct me, trauma is important to brainwashing, right? That part of the way that you do that is by traumatizing people. The way they do it online is, what I see is using traumatic content, traumatic propaganda, videos of, terrifying Jews, harming children, all of those incredibly harmful content, to me seems like it traumatizes the people who are consuming it, which gives an opportunity for the cult leaders to program them, to indoctrinate them. I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
So the bite model includes the E, which is emotional control. And I
Yep.
talk about making people feel like they're special and chosen, that they're going to save the planet, but also amazing amounts of guilt and fear, indoctrination. But I have a little different spin than you, Jim, in this, that because I've been trained in hypnosis since
Hmm.
1980. I was trained as a trainer in neuro-linguistic programming in
Yep.
1980 and 81 by the founders of that. And I separated from that whole group because I realized there was no ethics.
Hmm.
And if you have an agenda to sell more automobiles, these were very powerful covert hypnotic manipulation techniques, and I was aghast at that. I lost my train of thought. So what I wanted to say, Jim, is that like Edgar Schein in Coercive Persuasion cited Kurt Lewin's model of unfreezing, changing, and refreezing to
Mm.
describe this dual identity. You break somebody down,
Totally. Yeah.
then
Totally.
program them and build up the new identity. But with hypnosis, it can also be very subtle, and where it's done in increments, where you're not conscious of being traumatized. It may activate previous trauma that you had, maybe
Right.
were sexually
Yeah.
assaulted or mugged or had
Yeah.
a
Whatever your
traumatic death.
vulnerability is, right?
I mean, we're all human. We all have
Right.
vulnerabilities.
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
another thing I want to say for your listeners. There's a very important concept in social psychology called the fundamental attribution error, which is a fancy way of saying when humans are trying to understand other humans' behaviors, there's an unconscious bias, and this is around the world, to over attribute individual variables or dispositional variables and underestimate social, psychological, and contextual influences. In other words, what made Stephen vulnerable to the Moonies? He was weak. He was stupid. He didn't come from a good family. He didn't have a good religious, versus Steve wasn't educated about brainwashing and mind control. He thought only stupid people could fall for that crap. And you know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
we have to all have a certain level of humility that our minds can be hacked under the right
Yes.
conditions, instead of thinking we're super people. And the other thing I want to say is that sensory deprivation or sensory overload is the fastest way to flip people into a more hypnotized state of mind, where they're not analyzing and meta commenting on what they're observing. And what I've learned over the decades, because I've been asked to help people in so many different cults, not just religious cults, that even when, with all of my training, when I'm watching a cult leader doing his hypnotic inductions or whatever, I hit the pause button. Like,
Yeah.
I need to stay meta to that
Yeah.
rather than get absorbed. And Jim, I want to credit you. You asked me to look at a video game, and I confess I am of the generation where I didn't video game. Like, the last video game was Pac-Man. I know
Me
Right.
too.
I'm dating myself, but Jim showed me a clip out of, what was the video game?
Assassin's Creed.
Assassin's Creed, and he said, "Look at this 5 minutes and tell." And I was like, "This is hypnotic trance
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff here
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
embedded inside of a gaming
Yeah.
system." And young people are not taught any of this stuff, and there's no legislation that's being enforced about unethical influence, which is why, coming back to my doctoral dissertation, which anyone can read and see, I laid it out for any prosecutor, any judge, to understand what I'm talking about. Why? Because we have laws against trafficking,
Yeah.
fraud, force, or coercion. And while you don't need force in all mind control cases, you need the fraud and you need the coercion. And the bite model is the most robust model to date, one that actually has had some science applied to it that shows authoritarian control. So
And
again, the way we're going to solve this world problem is to get out of the overload, noise, and the polarization. And in my opinion, we need to be focused on planetary survival and work backwards from that,
Yep.
of where we're at right now, understanding the horrible situation with global warming, and all of the forces that are trying in their greed to keep power, fossil fuel industries, for example, to name a very dramatic one that's going to destroy the planet. We need to think for our children and our grandchildren and 7 generations from now, what do we need to do now? And America really is in danger of losing its position to at least be on a track to oppose authoritarian dictators like Putin and Xi and others.
I just want to thank you so much. We often talk about how we need better leaders, and I look at you as one of those leaders that is already there and available to people. We have like a few minutes left, and there's a number of things I'd like to hit on, but you just said a mouthful. When you talk about greed, when you talk about criminality, I think it's very important when we talk about these techniques that we never keep our eye off of following the money. The big lie, stop the steal, is that $250,000 raised on the grift. We talk about how when you were indoctrinated, it becomes part of a Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme. Your part of your job is to bring money in. So that's one point I want to make. The other thing is I'm practicing your techniques in my personal life with someone very brilliant who I know has been radicalized. There's multiple people. And I love being that safe space. I love being that kind heart because I know that I'm seeding something that I think will blossom into potentially saving, another mind from undue influence. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, it's doable. It really is. But you want to take a frame of let's pursue truth. Like
Yeah,
I'm prepared to put my
yeah,
ego aside and let's
yeah,
find out what's real and what's
yeah.
verifiable. But
I
I
love.
interrupted you, Heidi. Sorry.
No. I interrupted you. I just want to. Two more things I want to make sure that before we lose you that you talk about. You have framed the digital arms race as being the new nuclear race. That's one thing I'd like you to comment on because I think that's vastly important. And I'd like you to also mention just a quick summary of your experience with Ginny Thomas, because we believe the judicial coup is a major, major part of what we are fighting. So those 2 points.
Ask me the first one again.
The digital arms race.
Yeah. So human beings did not evolve to exist in a digital environment. And everything I've studied, some of the people who are the architects of this new environment are on the spectrum. They're people who have brilliant, but they have high anxiety around being in the real world, looking at people, breathing their air, etc., hugging them, etc. And so-called neurotypicals, of which I am one, if we're growing up on screens, it's rewiring our brains, and we're missing out on the moral and empathetic dimensions that's so crucial to love. I mean, what I say to people who've been controlled by a narcissist in a one-on-one, they said that they love you, but if they're not capable of empathy, they're not capable of love. They can say they love you, they can buy you gifts, but in their heart, they didn't get the love. And this is the theory, the latest theory is attachment disorder stuff, where they didn't get the love in their childhood to form a healthy sense of self. So everything they're doing is compensating for that.
Thank
Back
you
to
for that.
Ginny.
Thank you for that therapy moment. I really needed that. I'm finally over my ex now.
But people can actually, with the right therapeutic approach, and I was trained by Daniel Brown and his attachment order, people can actually overcome a personality
Oh
disorder
shit! Now I have hope.
with the right. I mean, they have to want it. It's not
Mhm.
something you can force people to have. Ginny Thomas and I met in 1986, 10 years after I left the Moonies, and I had forgotten about this, but I was leading an ex-member support group meeting in Kansas City, and Ginny had been exited by a deprogrammer named Kevin Garvey, who reportedly is a John Bircher. She was deprogrammed from a large group awareness training called LifeSpring, and she went on camera. Everybody knew that it was being recorded, and she talked about her struggles trying to figure out, what's a healthy balance. But she became a cult awareness activist. So at the time, we were working to try to get a cult awareness week in honor of Congressman Leo Ryan and all the women and children and people killed by Jim
Wow.
Jones. So she actually asked me to do a congressional briefing, and NBC gave me one of the recordings, which I had forgotten about. But yep, that was me talking about, what you hear me say all those years back. So she was doing that for about 10, what was it, 5 years or something. She introduced me at a cult awareness meeting to Clarence Thomas, who I shook his hand at the time. I wasn't into politics at that point. I was just like, whatever. But my understanding is the following year, she and he got converted to Catholicism by Antonin Scalia's son.
Oh, wow.
And if you're aware, there are authoritarian Catholics and
Yep.
We are.
Catholics who believe in Jesus and
We're very
helping the
well
poor.
aware. Yeah.
So this is the group that thinks the Pope is satanic for saying
Right.
we need to help immigrants. It's like the opposite of what Jesus taught. So, but my heart goes out to her because she, we saw the text she sent to Mark Meadows that reflected QAnon indoctrination.
Thank you.
100%.
And so I want her to remember, hey, remember me, Ginny. You read my book and you love my work and you wanted people to learn about cults. Time to step out of your ideological moment and reflect back on what happened from when you were helping people be aware of mind control authoritarian cults to saying we need to put Biden in Gitmo and try him or some nonsense.
Your kindness breaks my heart because I am so aware of how dangerous these people have been to our democracy. And when we talk about the CNP and the long game, we're talking about Ginny Thomas, we're talking about Mike Flynn, we're talking about these people. And so that kindness just really got me because we're in a war.
So
and we
we're
want
in a war, but we have to remember humanity and not turn the people who are trying to destroy democracy into objects that it becomes okay to demonize. But we can certainly call them out on their errant beliefs. People don't understand how much destruction Ayn Rand and the Fountainhead.
Oh, yes, we do. Yes.
So thinking selfishness is good and altruism is evil, Excuse me. This is a recipe for disaster for the planet Earth. We need each
Absolutely.
other. We are stronger together. We are better together. And, in terms of solutions to this, I do think we can do that. Part of my effort is to destigmatize the fact that people can be mind controlled. So I'm collaborating with friends and colleagues to do a hashtag I got out to mirror the Me Too. Like, yep, happened to me, but I got out. And instead of, making this wall for all the MAGA indoctrinees to feel like they're going to be shamed or embarrassed. No. Come on home. We miss you. We want to, hug you, and we want to play sports again with you and be part of our grandchildren.
Thank you. Hi-Fi, did you have something you want to say before we let
because
Dr.
of the
Hassan go?
real self that was
Okay,
Thank
people
you.
will
I
help de-radicalize themselves if they're given the tools and the supportive environment.
And
Thank
the
you.
opportunity. Yeah.
so here's a question I have. One of the things I've done over the last couple of years is I watched a lot of QAnon recruitment videos, and I watched a lot of ISIS recruitment videos, and it seems to me there's a lot of the same technical aspects in
Yep.
both of those. How are those methodologies not being regulated, outlawed, at least a warning, something? You talk about the video game Assassin's Creed. How is that allowed? How do we stop it?
So it's a complex system, and the solution is going to be needing complex system science. We're going to need to do preventive education as a
Yep.
public health emergency.
Yes.
Preventive education. I just am finishing a course, an online course for mental health professionals to understand what this dissociative disorder is and how to help their clients. Then we need recovery processes. But in all of these years, I have yet to hear someone high up in any government administration, particularly intelligence, say, oh, yeah, mind control exists. Of course,
Right.
brainwashing exists. The last person I saw on camera was an ABC mind control special after Jonestown in 1979. The former chief psychologist for the CIA, John Gittinger, said, oh, we didn't find anything that worked in MK Ultra, and we abandoned all of our research and we burned our
Oh
records.
God.
And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Biden was on that committee.
I'm MK Ultra 2.0 or 3.0, depending on what dimension you want to go for. But we have to be honest with the public and say, yes, the mind can be hacked. Here's how we do it. I'm going to add one more thing that I discovered just a few weeks ago, which was a Go Army PSYOPs recruitment video. I'm
Uh-huh.
not kidding, by the US Army. Come
Yep.
and join, because we're in a new level of warfare, psychological. Learn how to deceive the enemy.
Right.
But why don't we just tell the public, hey, we know these techniques. Here's how to protect yourself. We need to enforce regulations and legislate platforms who have been infiltrated by traitors like Mike Flynn and foreign actors like Putin's intelligence agencies and Xi and a bunch of other tyrants. Um, let's be honest. And so back to the I got out, the most powerful thing is people sharing their stories to normalize it. And look at all the documentaries and stories being told about mind control cults. The problem with all these, they're not explaining the bite model and the influence continuum in a way that will help protect people or help inoculate and help people to step back and reality test. So we have a lot to do, and activists who care should organize together. And this is going to be a multi-year. It's not going to be something we can do just till the midterms or just till the 2024 elections. But of course, we have to focus on making sure we have a majority in the Senate and
Yes.
Congress, and maintain the White House so we can pass legislation to undo some of the deleterious decisions by the radicalized Supreme Court.
We are so grateful that you came on our show. Jim, will
Mic
you take
drop.
us out? Do you have anything you want to add or say?
No, I mean, I have so many things I want to talk to Steve about, but I just want to thank you for what you've done. I know you've been under attack for decades now, and it's just an indication of how powerful and important your work is. And so everybody out there, please, at Cult Expert, follow Steve. Go to Freedom of Mind and watch. His
Yeah,
video.
I do blogs and podcasts,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to cover not just undue influence things on the influence continuum, but also ethical things. And yeah,
Yeah.
I did a 3.5-hour course for anybody to have the basics of. And I talk about cults, by the way, on the whole continuum. So I talk about benign ethical cults too.
Yeah.
You know what you're getting into. You can leave without fear or threats. You can read whatever you want to read, talk to whoever you want to talk to, and follow your heart, follow your gut. So let's not just say Trump, the cult of Trump. Let's talk about the authoritarian cult
Yeah.
of Trump,
Yes.
please.
Thank you very, very much. In my mind, I'm trying to unbuild a wall around the MAGA acolytes, and that will be one of my takeaways today. We are in a war, but we have to remember our humanity. Dr. Stephen Hassan, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. You're very kind.
Grateful, Steve. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Take care.
I don't know what to say. Most
How
important
do
man in the
you
world.
follow
I swear to
that
God.
up? You know,
I swear to
how do
God,
you follow
most
that?
important dude in the world who's been telling people this shit for 45 years. Listen to him. That's all I have to say.
Let's get out.
All right, we're out of here.
Love y'all.